Alrighty, well, hey, thanks so much, Ryan. It is super good to see you again. It's been a little bit, and I got to be honest. It was funny. I messaged you over on Twitter or X or Twix, whatever, and I think, hey, if you're cool with it, we'd love to do another video, another show together again because you are genuinely the most requested sort of repeat guests. I genuinely got YouTube comments that said, "When is Ryan coming back? Are you going to do something else with Ryan?" So look, the people love you, and we're ready to do it again if you're up for it.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me back. I'm really excited. Last time we talked about ransomware and we did analysis of builders, and we made some comments toward the end there that we would potentially do a follow-up video where we did some malware analysis. And I found a sample that is pretty fun and a couple novel techniques that I want to show off, and I think that people are going to enjoy it.
Thank you. I think it's super pertinent to kind of what I was messing around with over on a live stream after you were kind of teasing and giving me a preview as to what you were up to. And again, thank you so much for just being willing to do this. I didn't expect you to prepare and hey, take it all, overhaul and everything that you needed, but I'm super grateful. I'll let you roll with it. Take the floor.
Cool. All right, check it out. So, for anyone not familiar, and if you're not, you're going to love this. There's a website called malwaretrafficanalysis.net. It's run by Brad Duncan. He's with Palo Alto Networks Unit 42. He's been running this site for, let's see here, since what year? Oh, they're archived now. Let's go back.
But a
Where's
long
the
time,
archive?
hasn't it been?
Yeah, 2003. Oh, wow, over 10
That's
years now.
crazy. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So what he does on this site is he catalogs, well, the name kind of speaks for itself in a bit, traffic analysis for malware, and basically identifies, the infection chain and then gives a posting. Sometimes the posts will be extremely informative. Sometimes they'll basically just have like links to references. And then what I really love is that he includes, here, I'm going to zoom way in here. He includes like IOCs from the infection. He includes a PCAP of the traffic that was caused by the infection. And then typically the malware and artifacts, which is my favorite part because then I get my hands on some more malware and that's always a good time. So what I did, or what I'm going to do now, I guess, is go to 2013, or no, whoa, speaking of 10 years, I'm going
Well,
back too
time
far.
travel. Yeah.
Yeah, wait a minute. I picked this guy. I don't know why. I just randomly, we talked a week ago or whatever it was. I was like, this one, because it includes PikaBot. I'll get into that in a moment. And it also includes Cobalt Strike. And as soon as I opened up this article, I grabbed out the artifacts and I popped them into some of my malware VMs. And there's a link here that goes to X/Twitter, and I'll zoom in a little bit. There we go. And it's just a little breakdown of the domain that was utilized, the IP address. You can go find indicators of compromise over here. There's a nice little graphic and a breakdown of the traffic from Wireshark. And over here, where we've got the IOCs, if I zoom in a little bit more, you'll see that the infection chain was basically an email, phishing email, obviously, that led to a link. That link then led to a zip file. Inside the zip file was a JavaScript file. And I got excited when I saw that. I was like, ooh, JavaScript. I love JavaScript. And that then retrieves the PikaBot DLL, which then loads a second stage of PikaBot and then eventually leads to Cobalt Strike. So what I've done here is I wanted to show that PikaBot itself is fairly well understood. It's fairly well documented. I found this particular article to be my favorite from D01A, Mohammed Adel. I've not actually met this person yet. I just realized I need to reach out and be like, hey, I looked at your article. I like your stuff. So if you're out there, shout out. And the article shows that in this particular case that was analyzed, there was a first stage that involved JavaScript. But this first stage involved this JavaScript right here, which is not the JavaScript from the one from malware traffic analysis. And I thought, what would be really fun is to pull apart the JavaScript and analyze it. And then if it's worthy, depending on what it looks like, then show that off. And it is. And that's what we're going to do. So
Now,
first, yeah.
sorry, I gotta ask because this is something that I am always, I don't know, screaming and shouting about. Is it JavaScript or is it JScript when it can sort of run naturally natively on the Windows endpoint? I don't know if I'm a stickler for that, maybe to a horrible degree.
So I was even going to bring that up. I love the fact that you mentioned that. So this over here is an example of the zip file that was received in this phishing campaign, right? This td.zip.
Mm.
So when someone right clicks, or excuse me, when they double click on it, I'm going to right click because my default handler is actually set to WinRAR. So give me a moment. I'm going to open it with the Windows Explorer. What a lot of folks maybe don't realize is, and I'll change my icons nice and big. There we go. Is that natively Microsoft's operating system handles JScript. And that's their interpretation of, I think it's called, was it EMCA? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, ECMA script.
ECMA script. That's it. Yeah, which is essentially the default. What is it? The what should I call it? The foundational protocol for
I think that's
JavaScript. Should I
fair.
call it
Yeah.
something like that? And then everyone makes their versions on top of that, and then they make their engines on top of that. Like in Chrome, when JavaScript is running, it's actually running something referred to as the V8 engine. And there's different types of engines SpiderMonkey used to run in Mozilla. They have their own engines, they have their own interpretations, they add different libraries and things like that. But in Windows, if a user were to double click this zip file, they'd be presented with what looks just like a folder, right? However, it's actually on the fly decompressing. And by the way, Windows will store the contents of a zip file when it's accessing that file in the local app data slash temp and then slash temp1 underscore and then the name of the zip file. And you can actually use that as a forensic artifact, especially if you have like an EDR that records all those file folder creations and things of that nature. So if a user were to simply just double click on this, now for me, a little bit different because you'll notice that it actually has a handler assigned, which is Visual Studio. So that's a little different. But for most users, it just looks like it has like a little script icon. And when they double click, it invokes WScript. So the Windows scripting host, WSH, has WScript and CScript. And so W is the windowed version, essentially the GUI version. And if they were to double click, it just runs the JavaScript. And you maybe wonder, like, if someone received td.zip, right, and they see nuj.js, what would even get them to be like, yeah, I'm gonna double click.
I'm in. I'll take
I'm
12.
in. I'm down. Boop, boop. Like, why are you doing that? But anywho, so what I have over here is I have Remnux, which is an operating system put together by a couple of the SANS folks. It's just simply remnux.org. You can zoom in here and take a look at the URL. If you're not familiar with this distribution, it is super, super useful and handy. I freaking love it. And it comes, filled with all kinds of just a veritable cornucopia of awesome tools to use for malware analysis. So if I wanted to, and I do want to, the first thing that I could do is like over here, and I'm in Remnux, right, just in the terminal, is I can look at this JavaScript file. And when I first pull it up, like, what's the first thing, John, that you think when you see this?
Lot of nonsense comments with what look like lorem ipsum.
Yep, exactly,
to take
right?
up space. Yeah.
Exactly. So for anyone who may not be familiar, a lot of scripts will have filler. And sometimes those filler will be in the way of commands that don't really do anything. I mean, technically they do something, but they're not utilized. Like, empty variable assignments, variables being assigned values for no reason whatsoever. And oftentimes you'll have comments like this. So when you have these, you might notice, and here I'll find my little guy here. Like, here's an example. Right there is some actual JavaScript. Here's some actual JavaScript. There's some actual JavaScript. But the rest is just all this comments, right? And at first you're like, this is going to be a pain in the butt to look through. If I try to page through this, I might be like, it's going to be hard to pick out the actual code. You might be able to see, for example, there's a function down here. So the first thing that I like to do when trying to analyze these guys is to use a tool called Box.js. And I really like Box.js. It's included with, and I'll pipe this to less so we can see the help. There you go. Zoom out a little bit. There we are. And it's included with Remnux, and it basically can emulate and or actually just run and then analyze while running JavaScript. And it has all these cool features. If I page down, you'll see all kinds of cool stuff. You can set the timeouts and whether or not to rewrite evaluations, which is in JavaScript, eval means like run this block of code, that kind of thing. So without even having to give it any flags, parameters, or anything, we can simply just run Box.js and then provide it the script. And if we do this, the first time that I try to do this, it is going to fail. And I found that out by simply running it. And you'll see that it's trying to emulate the code, and it comes back with oopsie poopsies. And you might notice this guy right here says, if you can read this, rerun box.js with no shell error flag. So I'm like, all right, I'll go ahead and do that. What you might also notice is that it's actually created a directory. And this directory is where it would have its results, but it didn't get to run through the full thing. So what I'm going to do is basically just provide it that parameter that it asked me to give it. And when we do that, it will successfully complete. We'll see that we have a couple of scripts that were basically pulled out of it. So during the runtime, the script created additional scriptlets, if you will, and then we're able to see those. And if I just do a simple ls, I'll see I now have another folder. So I'll copy that. We'll cd into that guy and then take a look. And in here, we have a whole bunch of JavaScript files. And these are all the little scriptlets that it pulled out. But we also have like analysis.log. We have ioc.json. That's our baby right there. That's the one that we want right there. And then we've got snippets.json, which are little snippets of code, essentially. So if I look at, for example, analysis.log, it's the output from the tool when it ran, basically saying I found these little scriptlets. They created other scriptlets. We dropped them to the disk, so on and so forth. But you'll notice it references IOCs. So if we then just go take a look at ioc.json, boom, this essentially shows us exactly what the script does. So let's see, looking at the screen, I think my zoom level is good. I don't want to highlight because it'll be hard to read. So I'll just use this guy right here. So the first command, oddly enough, uses command.exe /c means run a command. It's going to run the delete command, and it tries to delete an encoded JavaScript file. So JSE, those are encoded JavaScript files. It's trivial to decode them, by the way, but it's just a method that they have. But after that, it starts to get fun. So after that, what it does is, let me get my little highlighter again. It uses command.exe /c and it echoes, and then it uses this little tricky method here. It uses set, which is typically used to set a variable, and it sets this using /p to cu, and it writes that value to this guy right here, sitting in temp. I'm going to pronounce it probably incorrectly, but dolorum.p.bat. I had to Google that, and I Googled it, and then I chuckled a bit. It is Latin for grief, pain, misery, and suffering.
How apt.
Like, yeah, I was wondering, did they use that on purpose? Yes, they absolutely used that on purpose. So it's creating a bat file, and actually the only thing in there right now is just cu. That's it. The next command that it runs, and let's see, I'll just go down a little bit here. I'm going to position this well on the page. There you go. The next command that it runs is this guy. And what this does is it echoes in RL. So when you, and it's going to send to that bat file, by the way, when you combine that with the previous CU, it becomes CURL or curl. So instead of having the string curl together, because they figured maybe signature detection would pick that up or something like that, right? It uses two different commands to do it. We have a URL, and the URL is going to be output to very similar to where that bat file is being created. It's the same name, just without the .bat, right? Misery and suffering. And what we have next is the invocation of that bat file. So the bat file, when run, is going to cause that file sitting at this domain that I won't try to pronounce. Yes, I will. Shaky astute trade.
That
Shaky as statues trade. Sure.
Statues. Yeah.
I should have gone with not pronouncing it. All right, so it downloads that file and it stores it. And then what we've got is that it does a rename. It runs a rename and it takes the version without the .bat and it names it QUI.Q. And if you look at Brad's IOC list from Malware Traffic Analysis, he mentions that that is actually the bot itself. That's PikaBot. And then it executes PikaBot using run-dll32. So run-dll32 is utilized to run exported functions from DLLs. And you simply give it two parameters. The first one is the DLL, and the second one is the exported function name. In this case, they chose the word enter for their exported function name for whatever reason. I don't know. So that would then cause PikaBot to execute. And by simply just using box.js, you're like, oh, well, I already know how that script works. However, probably like you, I am not always comfortable using an automated engine to just tell me like, oh, this is all it does. Like, you're good, bye, right? Like, forget all that. So I want to analyze the code. And sometimes you'll have, for example, multiple URLs that are stored in a downloader script, and you might want those other URLs so you can block them and perform threat and tell on them and all kinds of fun stuff. So the first thing that I tried to do here when analyzing this, I'm going to back up a directory, is we have this script and it's all ugly. Like, ugh, I can't read that, right? But if you notice, it's kind of easy to clean this up because the comments all begin with /* and they end with */. So if we use a regular expression to clean that out, then the code becomes far more evident very, very quickly. So if I zoom out, you see that's the script, right? You can just see that to the right, you can see a little bit of coloring that Vim's providing, right? But it's just a ton of just gobbledygook. I don't want that. I want to get rid of that. So one way that I came up with to do that is to basically just use, I like to use Perl. Hold on. I know some people
Whoa.
watching just heard, what did he say?
Holy cow.
And
I
they're
didn't
all
know.
stop video. I don't like to use Perl. I like to use Perl for one-liners from the command line, is what I should say. So we've got this guy. If I run like a head in and I look at it, I can, oops. Oh, head 2. There you go. I can see this is what I want to clean up. I want to get rid of that guy. And so I can do a cat of the script, and I can pipe that to Perl. PE is looping through each line and treating them as separate lines. And then I can basically take I want to find, and I have to escape the / and then the star. I want to find anything between that. So dot is matching anything but a new line, I believe, right? And then a star means as many as you possibly can. And then I'm going to escape the star at the end and then the / at the end. And if I run this, it cleans it up. It takes out all that nastiness. And if I just zoom out, you can see that now we just have the JavaScript. And it's kind of easy to see what it's doing. I'll zoom way in here. Is that it's taking a variable, it's creating it empty at first, and then it's concatenating characters. So the first character is T, and then R, and you get the idea. It spells true and false. And it does that over and over and over and over and over. All the commands that are going to be utilized basically just show up in this fashion in the script. Wow.
Yeah, I could see the full like new ActiveX, all of it.
Yeah, that's funny. But it's not strung together just yet. So there's a couple options that we have. We can use some tools out there to string things together. I haven't gotten one to work really well with this particular sample. The alternative is just to debug it. And I like to debug. A lot of people debug JavaScript in a browser. They just use the debug parameter in JavaScript that basically halts it as soon as it hits that. They attach the browser's debugger, whatever browser you like. By the way, I don't know if you've used this yet, but did you know that Firefox has a developer edition browser?
No.
It's awesome. It's called Firefox Developer Edition, basically. And it has a much more advanced, like, for options for like CSS, but also a better debugger. And I really, really enjoy it.
I had no idea. I've always just in like developer tools, F12, whatever, but
yeah, no, they have a special version that the F12 is even more advanced. And I was like, ooh, that's really cool. I used to use that for JavaScript. And then I found a way, I think I found it on Stack Exchange, just randomly like, can you debug JavaScript
please
in Visual Studio, like just a .js file? And I found a really easy way to do it. Before we do that though, you'll notice that the code is not necessarily cleaned, and it maybe, like some people would call it maybe a linter that has not been run on it. Like we have a function here, but it's tabbed over to the right, you know, and I don't want that. I want it to look pretty. So there's a tool that comes with Remnux, and it is called JS Beautify. And so we can use JS Beautify to make this prettier and to make it just more appealing and easier to read.
You're blowing my mind right now because I would, again, just, stupid, cut through it manually. We used like DE4JS the other day, which is one of the online browser ones. And can I also ask, is there a box PowerShell or box other language derivatives?
There is.
People get mad at me because, again, I just want to, play with it and cut through it. But what? Okay.
I guess they don't include it in Remnux, but yes, there is a box PowerShell.
Are there others? Am I just naive?
Not that I know of. And now that's a darn good question. That's a follow up for sure.
Box VBS. Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Heck yeah. So I guess I should probably push this to a new file since I didn't do that yet. So I'm going to make a file just called 2.js. I
It's the
usually just
most
do like 2,
horrifying
3.
regular expression in like said syntax. Yeah.
So now we have a 2.js. I'm going to run JS Beautify on 2.js. I think I have to give it an F if I remember correctly. Let's see the output. There you go. Now my function, everything's aligned on the left. My function's over here on the left, and it's much easier to read. So I love JS Beautify. There's a
That's awesome.
ton of versions of JS Beautify. I want to say it's something like JS or like jsbeautifier.org or something like that. You can just Google JS Beautify, and you'll find a web version. Which be careful putting rogue code into someone else's website. But it gives you a list at the bottom of all the different variations and all the different plugin types. There's plugins for like Atom if you use that text editor. There's all kinds of different versions of it. I love that tool. So we're going to push this to 3.js. And then now we have a much cleaner file. And if I were to just page up and page down, I go like, oh, there. At the very end, my function returns. I got another function. You can see the ActiveX object right there. And there's my next function. My try catch block is now aligned and it's easier to read. Like we're going to have a good time now, right? So at this point, you could just use a browser here in Remnux and debug it. But what I did is I copied this sucker over to my Windows machine. So I have, let's see, I guess I got it deleted. Let's extract it. And remember the password I set. Oh, I set the password, everyone's favorite password, infected.
Excellent.
So I have 3.js. Now, here's another thing that I really, really like to show folks because I'll be honest, I only found this like 2 years ago. And the fact that I didn't know this longer kind of like makes me a little sad. But when you're in Explorer, you can go to the address bar, delete whatever's in there, type in command or PowerShell for that example, and open to exactly where you are. So now I'm in that directory, and now I can run my commands directly against those files. And I love that feature.
Quality of life. Excellent.
Yeah, right? So I have 3.js right here, and then all I have to do, I'm not in Linux, is run wscript. And if you look at the options for wscript, you'll see that /d is there we go. Did I get my thing working? I did. /d is enable active debugging, and /x is execute any debugger. And all we have to do is do wscript /d/x and then give it the script name, and it will invoke the system debugger, and it will be like, do you want to debug that? And you go, yeah, I do. I absolutely want to debug that. So we just do wscript /D/x and then 3.js. And as soon as I hit enter, it pops up and it says choose a JIT, a just-in-time debugger. Now I've installed Visual Studio Community 2022. Nothing special, right? I didn't pay for it. It's just free, right, from Microsoft. So I hit OK, and it loads up a new project for me for my 3.js file. Dun, da, 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 and wait for it.
It feels like such overkill when we're like, hey, we have a JavaScript file. I got to open it in Visual Studio Community 2022.
Right? And give it a second. Here we go. Wasn't taking this long when I was doing it beforehand. It's that live demo. You know how that works. I'm going to grab some water too. There we go. All right, and it's paused. It pauses at the very beginning for you, which is obviously nice, right? It doesn't just go whoop and run it, and you're like, oh no, I made a boo-boo.
My malware.
Yeah, no, the malwares. So what I'm going to do, the way I like to debug these, and especially ones where I see it's just creating strings, right, is I just set breakpoints on any function invocations. And then if I see that it's just building more strings, then I set them on the returns or like right above the returns. So I can just hit continue and then just step through how the functions are being called. And I know that some folks are like, ooh, is he going to step through a debugger for like 20 minutes right now? No, we're going to make this a lot simpler. So I'm just going to set these breakpoints. I'm going to set one here. I'm going to set one on this invocation. and I just keep going down. You'll see this function called often, and excuse me, and it's going to be the runner essentially, and I'll show you how that's going to work. And I go down here, I'll set it to, actually I'll just set it here because this is going to build something with a call. It's just doing a regular expression to clear out some slashes. So that's pretty easy. We'll let it do that. I'm going to scroll through, see what that little guy is.
Now you do
Eventually,
this manually, right? Hey, just slapping breakpoints on every part. Does that get
yes,
egregious for an obnoxiously long script? Or
yes, it definitely can.
okay.
Oh, we don't have too many more here. Maybe two or three more. This again, this function right here, it's the runner
Yeah.
function, and eventually we're gonna hit an eval, and the eval is the most interesting thing. It's this little guy right here, this line. The reason this is interesting is that in JavaScript, whenever you're trying to find out, like, all right, what are you ultimately trying to do, is you're probably gonna find an eval that does that thing because eval means run this little, scriptlet, this block of JavaScript code. So it's going to build out some code and eventually passing through various functions to do cleanup and to make sure that ActiveX objects are instantiated. And then it's going to be like, all right, run it. Go ahead and just run that code. And it's going to run those commands that we saw in box.js. So here's the URL right here. And then I'll grab these last two invocations. I thought it was cute that they created and added a signature block towards the
Yeah.
end. Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, I wonder if it uses the signature block. I wonder if JavaScript can reference a signature block and then use that as actual code, like pull like a substring from it and just use that like sneakily. You know
That
what I
would be
mean? But
cool.
yeah, this particular one doesn't. But I'm interested in that. If anyone knows, drop in the comments. I'd love to know about that. So I'm just gonna hit continue, and you see that it's gonna make this function call right now. We have an empty object. We let it run and it's going to make another call. At first, they're empty calls, and then right after that, you see this guy, and this is D398. So something to pay attention to. I'm going to zoom in here. At the bottom left-hand side of Visual Studio. Oh, okay. I clicked that in my window. Do over. At the bottom left-hand side of Visual Studio, you'll see down here we have like autos and locals. This is what we really want right there, the locals to get the local variables. So as we're debugging, we can hover over a variable and see its output, but we can also just review them down here. We can set up watches and all kinds of fun stuff, but we're not going that far into this little bit of JavaScript. But I have this value, this D3. And so what is that value? Well, it looks like it's doing this. If something is undefined, it's trying to match on the fact that it is undefined. And the reason it's doing that is it's going to create a bunch of ActiveX objects. And if it can't make one of those, the return will be undefined. And it wants to know, oh, heck, that didn't work. Oops. So it has a little bit of error checking, I guess, if you can call it that.
Clever.
So here's the first eval it's going to do, and it's just checking to see if undefined is undefined. All right. So we continue on. We have another function call. If I step into it, you see it's going to start building out wscript script full name. So I let it build that out. Here's my eval again, and then you'll see that that's the value, wscript.script full name. And basically this is how it's going to build out additional scripts to then pass to the runner. I'm calling it a runner, the runner function, and then run that code. So I continue, and let's see, what did it build out this time? Okay, this time it built out the location of the script itself. So if I zoom in and I go down here, you'll see that it has grabbed the location of the script. And spoiler alert, it's going to try to delete the script because it's already running in memory. So it's just going to try to delete it. And we'll see that very shortly here you go. So this is the runner function that I call it a runner, right? Its name is W3274, blah, blah, blah. It's passing to this three different arguments. The first one is a command that if you can read it, text is a bit small. It is command.exe/c delete. It wants to delete the JavaScript file. And the next thing it's going to do is pass a false, and then it's going to pass a true. So what it's going to use is wscript.run basically. And so we can continue into this, and then you'll see here's what it's actually going to do. And I think I have the command towards the bottom. Let me open this up a little bit so we can see this.
Yeah, the full one there.
Here, wscript.shell.run. and it's going to pass in those 3 arguments. It's going to try to create that ActiveX object. It's right down there. Oh, I guess it's already on the screen. I didn't realize the tooltip was up there. So if you look up wscript.shell.run, and heck, let's just do it now. I think I have it up. I do. I planned ahead. If you look this up, I chose a random site, but that's okay. It takes 3 arguments. It can take up to 3 arguments, I should say. The first one is the command. The second one is the window style. And here it's sending false, which translates to 0, which basically means hide the window. So it doesn't want to pop up a new window when it activates and runs the command. The third thing is wait on return, which basically means we want to wait for it to return. And it does set that to true. It does want to make sure that it runs before moving on to the next thing, the next command. Otherwise, you could have a race condition. Who wants that in your malicious code, right? So if I continue on again, we see that we've got, we're going to skip past that guy. Now we've got another, it's doing this undefined match again. So every time it runs and tries to create an ActiveX object, it tries to see if that worked, basically. And here's the eval on there. We skip past it. It's going to create some additional code. Well, I'm saying create additional code. It's going to basically take those variables from another function, and just string all the characters together. So here's the actual command that's just about to be run, and then here's the eval to actually run it. So here's where then that file would be deleted. And in fact, I believe when I do this, let's minimize for a second. It's gone. So we have the zip file, but 3.js is gone. So it was able to instantiate that because our script file is gone now. It's running, it's still in memory, but it's gone. So the next call here, it's going to basically take the URL, and it's going to take the QUI.q, which is the name that it wants the file to be written to, and it's going to pass it to this function, which I would just call the downloader, basically. This is what's going to perform the actual download. So we continue past that, and then you'll see that here's another command that it has, strung those variables together. It's going to run, this is going to add the CU to the bat file. And it's going to do a hidden window, and then it's going to wait for it to finish. So we just continue on past it. And as you can see, the commands we saw in Box.js, it's just going to build them all out. It's going to run them using the runner function. It's going to check to, my runner function. It's going to check to see, like, did that work? Is it undefined? And if it's undefined, then oopsie poopsies. And that's pretty much how the script works. So being able to debug using Visual Studio, I really like that. And I know it does totally feel like overkill, right? Like you have this little bitty JavaScript file.
But it works.
And you're like, hey, install 20 gigs of Visual Studio or whatever, so I can debug that. And it's just really fun being able to go through these. Another way that you could do this is just set the breakpoint on the eval and disable all the other breakpoints, and then just watch what it's doing. Here's where it's going to actually set the CU in the bat file, and I can just continue on until I get back to my eval. It's going to do the undefined thing again. Each command that it goes right back to that. And I can
Is
just
that
keep going.
usually your workflow? Just, hey, breakpoints only, and then look at the locals down below and just sort of deconflict? Or are there other tools or tricks of the trade in this spot?
It depends. When I have code like this, where I can see that it's just taking those variables, and just building out strings, I'm not worried about other invocations in between those, because I know it's just going to call a function to build a string, pass that to a function that's going to basically then regex some slashes out, pass it to another function that's then going to build a command, pass it to the runner function, run the next function that verifies if the ActiveX object was created. It's basically, once you see the first 2 times it's repeating that process, then it just becomes something where I just go, okay, I'm just going to focus on the evals. And what I'm looking for is anything that might not have been in the Box.js output. In our case, all the commands, Box.js caught everything. It's a pretty simple script. And I just wanted to show that, you can take a script, you can clean it up, you can use a Perl one-liner, right? Like, I don't have to use Perl. Wait, what year is this? You can clean it up with some regular expression. You could probably, many people would just look through this, and a lot of like fledgling analysts would just look at the letters and be like, and just copy, okay, well, I'm going to have that and then that. Or they'll make a regular expression to just clean this up, and then just, take the strings out and then just stare at all the strings and be like, those are all the commands. That's all that's in here. There's nothing else in here. If you scrolled up and down, that's what you would find. And so the way I did it is I just set my breakpoints at the end where we have function invocations, and then you're good to go.
Sweet.
Let's see,
Okay.
we'll get one more and then we'll call it here. There you go. So here's where it's going to want to actually run the bat file, which does the download because now it has the curl command inside of it. All right. So, all right. Let's see. I think I'll kill my screen share for now. And there you go. So Box.js is a very useful tool. Don't forget, JS Beautify is just fantastic and does a really good job of making things clean and easier to understand. If you're going to debug, or even if you just want to read through it and you just want to try to understand it, like, visually, like bird's eye view kind of thing, it makes it so much easier. And then you can use those tools, but you don't always want to rely on them. An example is back in the day, back in 2000, I don't know, 13, 14, like Handsitter, Imitet, when they were first around, they would include typically, and a lot of downloaders do this today, is they include five times. They include 5 URLs, and it will grab the first URL, try to download the malware or whatever the next stage is, right? And if it can't, then it moves on to the next URL. But if it can, then it stops. And then if you don't do that manual analysis, you would never see those 4 other URLs, and then you're missing intel and you're missing IOCs and you're opening yourself up to, vulnerability and things of that nature. So yeah, I hope that was fun. I hope some folks enjoyed it, and I had fun going through that.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. Again, seriously, tools that I either uh, I don't know if I fall on my sword here. Did I know about them? Am I making an excuse for myself? Did I forget? But I knew Box PowerShell was a thing. Box JavaScript is just as cool. And then, hey, cracking it open with Visual Studio is still a fantastic idea. Just to step through it. Normally, I like copy paste back and forth within Node. Like I'll use the local command line Node.js to like, oh, this will intentionally break on like ActiveX objects or WScript calls, so that way I can see them. Um, if I like, oh, run it through Linux, but some of the other stuff you just kind of miss. And doing it manually, if it's obfuscated in one unique way, there's a bootloader sample that we're looking at that had this giant like array list of function mappings or other variables that will refer to something else that it will call. It gets a little bit messy in your mind. I'm sure you encounter a lot like those. And man, this is just a labyrinth, and doing this by hand still kind of sucks.
Yes. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that in Remnux, there's a tool called Rhino. It is not as good as Box.js, but I have had situations where one will not work and the other does work, including when Box.js might let me down and I get surprised because it's my little baby. I love it. But then all of a sudden, Rhino works. And Rhino is an enginized version of SpiderMonkey, which is the engine that runs in Mozilla Firefox, basically.
Is that just from the command line RHINO?
Yep,
Sweet.
that's it.
Very cool. Well, hey, thank you so much, Ryan. Again, I want to be cognizant of your time, but thank you for even just preparing, thinking this up, and bringing it to us. Like, totally didn't have to do that, and I super appreciate it. And so, thank you. I hope the comments, and we'll keep singing your praises, and we'll get together again eventually, sometime soon.
Yes, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, thanks again.